Hi everyone and welcome to another segment of AEC+-tech Talks. These talks are organized by AEC+-tech, a platform and community established to help you stay updated and engaged with the latest tools and technologies within the building industry. Today we are joined by three amazing panelists who are all sustainability leaders within their firms and beyond. And they are pioneering many initiatives to lower the carbon footprint in the building industry. This event will be recorded and saved on AEC+-tech YouTube channel. If you have any questions for our panelists during the event, please feel free to post them in the LinkedIn or YouTube chat box, and we will do our best to answer them in the Q&A portion of the talk at the end. I'm going to briefly introduce our three wonderful panelists now, and then we'll let them talk more about themselves and their work. I'll start by Kathleen. Kathleen Hetrick is a WELL AP and LEED AP accredited associate at Buro Happold and is a Bloomberg Fellow at the Bloomberg School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins University. As part of the Buro Happold Los Angeles sustainability team, Kathleen combines her passion for regenerative design with a technical background in architectural engineering. She leads the sustainable design process on a wide range of cutting-edge projects, including Living Building Challenge projects, net zero manufacturing campuses, global embodied carbon purchasing guidelines, and corporate sustainability plans. She also facilitates Buro Happold's regional outreach initiatives to encourage local K-12 students to pursue sustainability-focused careers in STEM. She is currently a board member of USGBC LA and is one of the founding instigators of Carbon Leadership Forum Los Angeles. Welcome, Kathleen, and thank you so much for joining us today. Our next panelist is Stacy Smedley. Stacy has over 18 years of experience in the architecture and construction professions. Her resume includes the first LEED for Homes Platinum certified projects in Washington State and the first project in the world to be certified under Living Building version 2.0 standards. As Sustainability Director at Skanska, Stacy leads sustainable initiatives and is considered a subject matter expert in carbon emissions associated with buildings and construction. In her role as Executive Director of Building Transparency, she provides open access data and tools to address embodied carbon's role in climate change. Today, I noticed that Stacy has over 12,000 followers on LinkedIn. She is definitely a sustainability leader in the industry, and we are thrilled to have her today with us. Welcome, Stacy. And our next panelist is James Bowles. James is a 4D planning specialist with a background in engineering and construction. He runs a 4D planning consultancy and leads the global industry group ZERO, which is focused on embodied carbon. James has 22 years of project delivery experience and worked on a wide range of projects in scale, type, and location. I've recently had the pleasure of joining the group ZERO, and I've been enjoying the super committed and active spirit of the group. James will tell us all about it today. Happy to have you, James, and welcome. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kathleen to teach us about, actually, I think Stacy first. So I'm going to hand over to Stacy to teach us about embodied carbon and the tools we have to reduce it and her experience overall. And after that, we will hear from Kathleen, and then James will go last, and then we'll have Q&A at the end. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks everyone. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my slides, and I think I only have 15 minutes and I have a lot to say, so I'm going to speak a little bit quickly, and I'll skip over some things towards the end if I don't get to make it through. But really today I'm wearing my two hats, both as the Sustainability Director at Skanska, as an Executive Director of Building Transparency, and really all the work that I've been doing for the past 5 years or so is around enabling low carbon procurement and industrial decarbonization of the built environment. What we're talking about when we're talking about decarbonizing buildings is really in two buckets. We have the operational energy bucket, all the energy that the buildings consume and the source of that energy, how efficient the buildings are once they're operational to reduce energy consumption. And then we have embodied carbon emissions, which are really all of the emissions associated with building materials and constructing buildings. So between those two, buildings equate for almost 40% of global CO2 emissions. And actually, we believe it's even more than that because some of these emissions actually spill over into transportation of materials and other industries that may not be accounted for in that 11%. So all that to be said, CO2 emitted by our building stock is a very big component of global CO2 emissions, which of course are impacting our climate. I like showing this graphic just as my cartoon version of how to really visualize these emissions. If you think about operational carbon, again, light switches go on, HVAC units start working, and energy grids are giving that energy for all those things to happen in that one image. To the left is everything else, really, when you think about how we manufacture materials, transport materials to a construction site, install materials on a construction site, replace them during a building's life, and then demolish them at the end of that building's life. So all of that is in this embodied carbon emissions bucket. And we have tended to focus on this operational carbon bucket most explicitly over the past 4 or 5 decades. So there's an urgent need to catch up in terms of our understanding on embodied carbon. Another reason for this urgency is that we are building a lot. So in the next few decades, we're building over 2 trillion square feet of buildings worldwide, which is about the equivalent of a New York City every 30 days for the next 30 plus years. And we now know that these embodied carbon emissions, when you look at a typical building, can be half, if not more, of a building's emissions over its life. And that, again, is because they're spent at the time of manufacturing and installation largely in terms of these emission sources. And we are getting better at the efficiency of our buildings when it comes to operational carbon, as well as decarbonizing our grids. So embodied carbon becomes vitally important. I'm not going to go into all the technical details in a longer presentation, but just to understand this, there are these stages of emissions that we're talking about. Work that we've done at Building Transparency really puts a pin on the point that the majority of these emissions for major construction materials, this is looking at concrete, are in that production stage, how we make the material, which means that we have to make the decision on a lower carbon material at that time of production and specification. This blue bar is the production, and then everything else, transportation, is on top. Just another example, the same is true for steel. So if you look at the manufacturing emissions of steel, even next to the transportation globally of steel, those manufacturing emissions are the place where the major emissions are happening and need to be reduced. We are at a tipping point when it comes to this based on what's happening with climate change and the commitments that we're seeing come out of various places. We're trying to meet our temperature increase limits. We're understanding that we're actually blowing past them with the new science reports that are coming out of IPCC. And we're actually now experiencing this. So I love this graphic of what was predicted to be 2050 by a weatherman in the UK, and then what happened just a week or two ago of us actually meeting those 2050 hypothetical temperatures. So the time is now for us to really reduce. At the same time, we're seeing commitments coming at both the private and public sector. Private corporations are building in zero carbon commitments around these embodied carbon emissions of what they make and what they build. And now actually trying to meet them. In the public policy side, we're also seeing this notably in 2 different places where Building Transparency is engaged. One is through the United Nations work to create a decarbonization initiative around concrete, cement, and steel, using disclosure and reduction targets that countries could sign on to. And then just this week, in the bill that's coming out of the federal budget, there's about $5.5 billion in investment for disclosure of carbon emissions of building materials by manufacturers and procurement pilot programs that would incentivize low carbon materials to be procured. So that's very exciting here where I sit. Again, Building Transparency is a nonprofit where a lot of this work is happening for us. And me personally, it's a nonprofit with a mission of providing open access tools and data that can really help reduce these embodied carbon emissions. We are funded by a source of very different places across the AEC industry. This is important because everyone has a role to play in this work, whether you're an owner, an architect, an engineer, or a contractor, or a material manufacturer. So everyone needs to be invested and engaged. And then very quickly, because I think I only have about 4 minutes left, the way that we are doing this at Building Transparency and providing this data to industry is through a free open access tool that we call the Embodied Carbon and Construction Calculator, or EC3. You are able to go to our website and register for free. What that tool is doing is really supporting these policies that we're seeing from both the public and the private sector of requiring disclosure of this carbon data for materials through environmental product declarations that are verified, setting carbon targets for your products and your projects, utilizing our free database of these declarations to compare manufacturers and source low carbon options for your projects, and then report your actual realized carbon emissions at the end of your project, which is just quantity of material times carbon intensity of material. A little bit on EPDs. They are the nutrition labels that are these third-party verified documents of carbon intensity per unit of material. Think about going down a cereal aisle and wanting to get the lowest carb cereal. If you're on a low-carb diet, you can get the carbs per serving size. For an environmental product declaration of a material, it's kilograms of CO2 equivalent per unit of material. So that's really what EPDs are providing for us when it comes to understanding carbon emissions of products. And what EC3 allows you to do is go in and actually start to do comparisons across different manufacturers, whether it's concrete or carpet, understand the carbon emissions of all of their products, and then begin to select low carbon options. What this means, and what we're seeing already, is as we begin to decarbonize and have this data to make informed decisions, the emissions from all these manufacturers are beginning to lower. Here in Washington State, where we've had environmental product declarations and owners like Microsoft, contractors like Skanska using this data in EC3, there's been an almost 20% emissions reduction for concrete suppliers in our local market. I'm just going to skip through a very quick walkthrough of the tool in the next minute or so. You can log into the tool and register at buildingtransparency.org. Again, what we're trying to do is catalyze this digital information of these environmental product declarations for a suite of building materials that folks can then go in and access and use for comparison. If I just walk through how I do this for concretes, you can click on concrete and then ready mixed and then next, and dig into concrete specifications, specify a strength of your concrete and a geography here, and then click the search button. What that will do is return to you all of the results of mix-specific EPDs for concretes. You'll see here it's telling you we've got 591 EPDs across all of these suppliers in Washington State. And these are the carbon intensities of their 5,000 PSI mixes that they've disclosed. So this is telling you directionally is who are the lower emitting suppliers for concrete in that market or region, and enabling you to actually dig into their products and mixes to make an informed specification choice. You can even get it into the actual product level where you're looking at these three mixes from these three suppliers and understanding the lowest carbon option if you have all three of them submitting a bid for your project. And then very quickly on the project side, you can build up a project in the tool and put in your quantities. So this is very much like cost estimating where you have carbon intensity per unit versus cost per unit. So here's all the different inputs for the quantities. Here's how you can search for those collections of EPD data or actual EPDs within EC3 to set the carbon intensity, just walking through what I just showed you, and then enabling the math to happen where we've got quantity times carbon intensity to give you a range of what's possible based on all of the suppliers in the market. And then also visualizing where your major impacts are for your project. So on the left here is looking at the carbon intensities of concrete versus sheathing panels. So if I was this project, I really want to focus on my concrete first. It's the biggest carbon impact. And then you can roll all the way up to a building level view of the target that you could use for reduction. I'm just going to skip some of these time, but I can go back in and actually then click on compare, like I showed you previously. See that Stoneway is my lowest carbon option for my concrete mix. Select a Stoneway mix that I think will work for my my project to see how it compares to the whole range of mixes for all of the suppliers, and then use that in my project to get to a realized carbon accounting for that input. So again, this is all about just getting the data that's necessary to understand what you actually spent on your project from a carbon perspective, to send the signal to the market that we actually need this data to be able to do these kind of accountings. And then, of course, EC3 is a free tool to hopefully make this as accessible as possible to everyone in the industry. I'm going to skip around just a little bit because of our time. I think what we're seeing at this tipping point conversation is that this is becoming something that people are beginning to understand and want to do. We've got about 25,000 users of EC3 in 70 countries. Over 2,300 projects have been entered. And what I love the most is just how many EPDs we're getting now for all these different products in the tool. This is looking at concretes of over 40,000 And then for all our other materials, we're up over 3,000 now in terms of construction products with these product-specific environmental product declarations. With that, I will stop because I know we have other really good content to share from our other presenters.
This was amazing. Thank you so much, Stacey. I just have a quick question. So, and then we'll ask the rest of questions at the end. So, are also architects and so contractors are already using EC3. So are also architects and designers using the platform?
Yes, so we're about 35% of our users are architects right now, and that's because there's a big value in just having this product-specific carbon data available at time of design decision. So you're able to actually go in very quickly and understand if I use this wall assembly system versus that, I can build that up in EC3, look at the different products and make a carbon comparison of that. Or even during specification, say I've got my 3 carpet manufacturers I always use, my favorite 3 carpet tiles. I can go in and compare their carbon intensities and say, okay, this one's the lowest, so that's going to be my basis of design and my specification. Typically what happens is it starts in design with architects, engineers doing that quantification with design quantities and making design choices. And then that same project moves to the contractor responsibility for the as-built accounting for what was actually procured.
That's amazing. That's super helpful. I love the comparison feature. Super helpful. Thanks a lot. So next we will hear from Kathleen. Kathleen, do you mind sharing your screen with us? And tell us about it?
Yeah, sure. Okay, let me see here. Okay, can y'all see this?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Hi, y'all. Calling in from Los Angeles. Thank you for spending your Friday with me for a little bit. So I'm going to be talking about, how we actually implement decarb across embodied carbon, operational carbon, and then even get a little bit into how it starts to show up in the construction side of things, all the equipment that we use. And I love this little cartoon because I think it's like for all of us, whether we're trying to lose weight or be healthy or reduce carbon on our projects, right? We can have the best intentions ever. And that's sort of what we're seeing with people having a backlash with like net zero, right? You can have the best intentions, the best PR, but really you need to get over that flaming gap of, I don't have a plan. I'm not actually doing anything about it, because that's where we need to get to the super awesome outcome, which is, surviving for ourselves and next generation through climate change, right? So decarb for real, not BS. And since as long as I've been working, carbon had kind of really been the realm of MEP engineers, right? We're thinking about operational carbon, energy efficiency, solar panels, chill beams, all of that stuff has really been kind of in the how the building operates and what's that across a lifetime. And then through amazing people like Stacy, who are, definitely my heroes, we've now seen embodied carbon, so it's the structurals, the facade, even like your carpet choices are now coming into the carbon conversation. And if you're a nerd about waste and you're doing true certification or thinking about circularity, that's part of the conversation now. And even finally, we're working so closely with the contractors of, how can we put solar on the trailers and then our lights and all of our excavators, and how does this all kind of tell this picture, whether you talk about carbon from the A1 through C perspective, which is like kind of like in the weeds of how we do LCAs, or maybe you run ESG for a giant company and you talk in scope 1, 2, and 3. This is everything that we need to be thinking about. And it's really important here, the stuff in the middle, that we think about how this, it kind of ends up impacting communities as well, because it's not just a carbon story that we're good about. It's also a human health and environmental justice story. So all along the way, whether we're thinking about the fossil fuels we use to make the plastics in our piping or the manufacturing of the steel, like Stacy was talking about, the construction processes, even how we get rid of things. My brother's a firefighter. If, the material that burns up in people's homes and businesses is made with high carbon toxic materials, my brother's health is impacted. So we have to see the whole story and think both from the climate issue, but also the here and now, that human health issue and who's really getting impacted, right? As designers, architects, engineers, whatever you want to call yourself, we have so much power to do this. And it's real. It's not just cute little graphics that our amazing graphics team made. This is real life for people. It's not just an American issue. This is a photo of San Pedro down in Los Angeles, where I live, where you can see, fossil fuels refineries for our diesel and gas for our trucks, and the petrochemicals for our paint are made in someone's backyard, just like the same things happen in Durban, South Africa. So we can live all over the world, and this is an issue for real people, higher rates of asthma, higher rates of cancer, and of course, climate change. So I'm sure wherever anyone's calling in from, you've seen these, Louisiana, Warsaw, it's similar wherever we go. So it has real impacts, and it's not just about future generations. I mean, I know it's important to think about kids and what's going to happen in 2100, but right now, air pollution is an issue that we can attack when we talk about when we attack carbon and when we attack our supply chain and attack energy efficiency, right? That's what decarb's all about. It's the here and now, and also thinking about the future. So really exciting that we're getting some, federal stuff passed in the United States. So it was really a shining light in my life yesterday. And we got to push harder, wherever we are or across the globe. And, at least for us in the United States, all of this decarb work is really important, but we really need to think about environmental justice too. You can read the great Dr. Robert Bullard. He talks about America being segregated, and so is pollution. And that zip code today, where we live, is the most potent predictor for an individual's health and well-being. So we need, in the building industry, all the great technology stuff, all of the cool, amazing design, Pritzker Prize winners, Living Building Challenge. We can't just think about the occupants that we're designing for. We have to think about everyone that touches, because too often industrial pollution from our building materials or from the power that we put into our buildings is harming the health and the environment of communities that we don't build for. So we really need to think about this as an environmental justice issue. So I'll get off my, one more thing. And I think I'll talk about construction. We'll talk about energy real quick. All of the great work Stacy's doing around the, and how do we, clean up industry through embodied carbon. Again, these pollution disparities, we see it across the board, right? Even the way that we're, if you're getting, your facade is coming into a port and then getting trucked to a project site, that's pollution, that's carbon, and it's impacting people of color more than it is for white people. So we really need to think about this from an environmental justice, point of view. And again, if you're working in the ESG space, you're trying to figure out how social indicators or governance works, all of this gets tied together into that. It's not just an environmental issue. So I'm going to quickly run through kind of like 3 implementation, just give you guys some ideas of embodied carbon, the operational carbon, and on-site emissions decarb. So I'm going to fly through these. I'll also post some links of some other resources for y'all. But in terms of embodied carbon, you don't have to use mass timber to reduce embodied carbon. It really comes into how you're planning, how you're designing, and then the amazing work of all the folks with building transparency and EC3, how you're procuring those materials. So, maybe you're really far into a project and you're just hearing this now. You can still do something. You could still make better choices in how you procure your carpet, your steel, your flooring tile, your ceiling tile. That can still happen, right? But, if you're just starting out, or maybe you've got a giant portfolio of buildings because you run some mega company in India or in Louisiana, building less can really help the embodied carbon story. And then just being smarter about design, being a better optimizer of your structural systems, making better choices. It doesn't have to be at the beginning of the project. It can really come at any point. And I would say, and a lot of these graphics are from EC3, my favorite tool in the world. I'm in it every day. If you're working with concrete, really start to work with your concrete subs as soon as you can. Ask them about resteel rebar, recycled steel for your rebar. Ask if they've got fly ash available, slag. Maybe they can use 1L cement in there. And always push your structural engineer. They can save you money on projects, and they have the power to cut carbon. So these are kind of the top things that I would recommend. And really sit down with your subcontractor and ask them if they have EPDs for concrete and how low can they go while still meeting their performance requirements. And ask your structural engineers if you've got GWP targets in their specifications, and if they don't, ask them to do better, right? And then for steel comes in such a wide variety of shapes and sizes. Right now, like if you can just even think about choosing like wide flange over HSS can really help move the needle. Don't forget all the other steel elements in your projects, like your metal duct, your studs. If you go with a better procurement option, you can reduce some carbon there. Think about always asking, what are your local options? Can you use electric arc furnace instead of blast arc furnace? EAF will shred carbon in your project like no tomorrow. But we have a lot of it in the United States. There's some of it available in the EU, But if you're working in Asia, you have to really kind of see what technology's out there, and we really need to be hammering on investing into clean steel, either through green hydrogen or using electric arc furnace. But it's really something that we need to do, and always choose local. If you can get and work with like a local manufacturer rather than shipping it across the world, that's always a really important option for steel. And work with your subs on fabrication. It reduces cost if they're, when we do our Revit models and we, come up with like some amount of steel that we're going to procure, and then suddenly that number doubles. That's not just more cost for your project, but more embodied carbon. So really working with the steels on how the steel subs on how they actually fabricate and make this stuff. So it's great to not have a surprise, halfway through CA where you're sitting on top of a lot more steel than you thought. For enclosures, I think, you can read all the bullet points here, but I would say get XPS out of your projects. I know it's great for energy efficiency, but it's terrible for cancer and it's terrible for carbon. There's a lot of cool companies now that are doing, very like high-tech, super sustainable versions of XPS. I think Owens Corning's got a product that is not using dangerous HFCs to make it. But whatever you can do to get it out, insulation is always kind of that top thing that you can take a look at your details and see, how can I remove this, because it really packs an embodied carbon and a health punch. For your wall assemblies, if the architects out there, you design these every day in, day out, you've got your standard details, go into EC3 and really dig into it. How can you choose the most sustainable wall board? Can you try out sheep's wool insulation for your bat on projects? There's so much you can do to just have a standard detail that's super low carbon. And it's a hard job. You also have to think about acoustic considerations and what's going to meet your client's requirements. But we really think that having like a really low, like great details, super low embodied carbon, you can do a lot with your wall assemblies. And finally, floor and ceiling, just simplify it. You don't have to have a concrete slab and then carpet on top of it. Just keep the concrete slab, but maybe that concrete doesn't need to be 5 inches. Maybe you can be a little bit smarter of like separating the structural elements from the aesthetic elements. There's a lot of EPDs out there for carpet. Really good. You can really go with some really low, almost like carbon neutral products out there that are way better than like business as usual. But you can also look at some of the tried and true stuff, find reclaimed wood, go with bamboo flooring if it's FFC certified, even using what's it called, linoleum, which is like made out of rapeseed oil. So there's tons of options out there, and always use the healthy materials from Parsons. They have a great list of biomaterials that are sustainable and healthy for people too. So that's just like my recommendations for decarbonizing embodied carbon. And anytime you're thinking about, again, embodied carbon, think about the health impacts. Concrete and cement making, it releases a lot of particulate matter, which gets into people's lungs, which was an issue for COVID and an issue for asthma, an issue for COPD. So every kilogram of carbon that you're reducing, you're also improving human health somewhere, even for the people who are, mixing it in batches on site. So always think of these two things together. On the operational side, I'm going to really quickly talk to you about a project that we have in Los Angeles. We've got a great climate, but if you're in any Mediterranean climate, this will all make sense for you. Basically, what you want to do is throw a bunch of solar on there, make sure you've got a heat pump. Be careful in the United States because not all of the heat pumps have the low GWP refrigerants. So that's kind of a hard thing to think about, is like, how can you do the right thing with refrigerants and the right thing on electrification? But really, it is kind of like a buckshot of lots of different things. You have mixed mode automated windows, so you can have natural ventilation for architects, really keeping it that, your floor, the width of like your building and like a pretty perfect range. You can have that mixed mode ventilation work out. So the architect gets involved, architects get involved with, if you're going to have a glazed building, you have to spend the money on high spec glass. We've also used phase change material, which is a really cool technology. It's pretty old to think about, but they're making it in new ways so that instead of having, if you can't get high thermal concrete into your buildings to make the most of those diurnal swings, they're now taking this. I'll show you a picture real quick. Oh shoot, maybe I deleted it. I'll find a picture and send it to you guys. But it's basically it's a material that kind of acts like ice in that it absorbs the heat during the day and then releases it at night. But it's a pretty benign organic material, and it can really help reduce peak loads in projects. Think about putting radiant cooling in your slabs rather than kind of like your old school systems. And, you know, this is really important for us, especially as we think of resiliency. It's going to get hot everywhere. I think so many people, whether you're in Texas, Australia, or the EU, we're you know, running into heat waves, you know, just last week. So thinking about how buildings operate in the winter season, can you do a lot of natural ventilation? Maybe during your shoulder seasons, can you open up the windows sometimes, check for the air quality, and, you know, rely on systems like radiant and cooling, and then always kind of having maybe a backup system, like even a dumb VAV system that can, you know, kind of hit your peak loads. That's really gonna help us design for efficiency and sufficiency. And it's not just the technology, it's thinking about how to choose more sustainable, you know, process equipment. This is something that we're seeing in a lot of projects, is that, you know, the process loads are going up and up, you know, with our server rooms. So like, how can you work with your the owners on choosing better equipment, getting people to get more comfortable with a higher set point, right? Push that up to 78 or even higher in some, you know, some countries like in India, where it's, you know, people are used to being in the heat, or in you know, the Middle East. How can we get people to really think about adaptive comfort, doing automated mixed mode ventilation whenever we can? And that's how we really, you know, you can have electrification where you're not using any fossil fuels, you're just using heat pumps and electrification. But the main way that we do this is that energy efficiency and building less, so that we have to use less energy as total. That's really what's going to help you, especially in climates where heat pumps have to work so much harder because they're in heat mode, right? If you're building in Chicago or Boston, the name of the game is still the same. We have to push these EUIs down as far as we can, and we have to use passive roles and, you know, active systems. And, you know, there's still there's tons of health overlaps here too. You know, when you're thinking about how you're putting in your super high performance insulation, don't only think about it from your U values, but think about the embodied carbon. Use the EC3 tool to look at the different options, and then also see, you know, some of them are red list free, or at least have a declare label, so you can really optimize in your specifications how you can get your insulation to not only, you know, do great from the operational carbon, do great from the embodied carbon, and protect human health. And then my last couple of slides, and I'm going to mile a minute. On-site construction, it's crazy. It's so much carbon, we're not tracking it, and it's terrible. So really, we need to be pushing. California just came out with a lot of funding to go electrification for construction equipment. It's a ton. It relies on diesel. All of our construction sites rely on diesel every day, even worse than like the typical stuff that you throw into your truck or your car. So we really need to be asking equipment manufacturers like Volvo or Caterpillar to move into electrification, get them into our projects. There's some really cool stuff happening in Oslo and Scandinavia and all over the EU right now that we really need to be emulating from the US, and even the way that we're thinking about our fleets. This is a really key issue. And luckily, the C40 movement is looking into this through clean construction in Los Angeles and Mexico City, and a couple other ones are trying to pioneer this. It's like, how can we start to build a market for electrified construction equipment? It's really important. And it's out there, right? Just start asking about it. Ask if you can do solar powered light towers. Ask if you can throw some solar on the trailers. Move away from, there's like so many cool startup companies that are, you know, they're doing the electric batteries with the solar for backup in terms of like disaster use. You know, they've got trailers where you've got the whole thing together, the batteries, the solar, backup power. Get rid of those diesel generators on site, or like at least make them as small as you can, and start asking about this equipment. We really need to, and even ask if you can get renewable diesel, you know, poured into the fuels as a switch. That option is there. We've got great folks like Skanska doing it already. Keep putting pressure on your contractors. And this is like really important, because not only does it clean the air around construction sites, but if you've got an EIR or concerned community, it's also quieter. So everybody wins. Less carbon, better air quality, less noisy. Construction become a nice thing, not a nuisance. So I think that's what I have today. You know, just look around your cities and see all the different ways that carbon manifests itself. You know, in LA, we literally have oil and gas facilities right next to people's homes. Every ounce of carbon that we wring out of our buildings and get out of our, you know, real estate portfolios mean that this doesn't have to be the case anymore. You know, we need to be putting pressure on our ports, on our airports. That all needs to get decarbonized, so that when we're pulling stuff in from our supply chain, it's really clean. We need to work with our manufacturers to make sure they're not polluting communities when we're trying to design a sustainable building. It has to be sustainable for their, the communities around us itself. And we should be asking ourselves why aren't we on the front lines with climate youth leaders? Not just the Gretas of the world, but everyone, every local issue. Engineers, architects, we should be supporting them and getting involved on the activism side of things. So yeah, think about your project life cycle. Get local, keep your projects local, buy local. Look at your specifications. They're really powerful. If you're an engineer, an architect, or whoever you are, however you identify, your specifications are power. And if people don't care about climate change, sad for them. Talk about health. They don't talk about they don't care about human health. Talk about risk. Talk about climate risk and flooding and wildfires and power grids failing. And if they don't like that, they probably like money. And I can guarantee you, if you really think smart, especially around embodied carbon, you can save people money. And of course, listen and support your fence line communities. So that's my soapbox. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. The beautiful presentation, super inspirational. Thanks for being such an inspirational leader. So a quick question. So all this amazing things, projects you showed us, are they certain solutions, tools, products that you have used in the process? You were showing some energy models that you've used in the process, like some of the startups that you mentioned, and you can share with us their names.
Yeah, so for energy modeling, we love IES. I also really recommend, if you're thinking about resiliency, there's some really great websites like AutoCase just came out with a really cool free environmental justice tool. I really recommend everyone use it. I'll drop it in the link. EC3, of course, is my favorite thing in the world. It's changed my life. It's changed all of my projects for the better. Stacy's a queen. I'll definitely drop a link in there and some trainings that we've done of how to use it. We also use Tally software, which is I think also now maybe owned by Building Transparency, maybe. One click LCA software is like a competitor to that, but they even do, you can look at the carbon of your supply chain. If you're even like a product manufacturer, they can help make you have EPDs. There's some really cool resiliency tools out there that I can share. Some of them have kind of come out of the US government, but they're great ways of looking at how hot is the climate gonna get, by 2100, how many days over 100 degrees Fahrenheit are we gonna have? So those are the first things that come to my mind. I'll drop a bunch of links in. I know I wanna give the chance for James to talk, so
Great.
I'll drop a bunch of stuff in there, yeah. Thanks.
Perfect, thank you, Kathleen, thanks a lot. Okay, great, so next we'll hear from James.
Hi, Kathleen, that was awesome, and Stacy, that was as well. So I'm going to try and get the energy. So it's 7 p.m. here in London.
Awesome, thank you, James. Sorry, it's too late for you, 7 p.m. on Friday, but thanks for joining us.
I'm going to try putting some energy into this, but I've kind of given this presentation quite a few times, so I might go on autopilot, my voice might go, anything might happen, but let's see.
Oh, you'll be fine.
So should I share, if I share screen?
Share screen, please, yeah.
Okay, you see that?
Yeah, we can see your screen now.
Okay, first off, I feel like a complete imposter in this room. Stacy and I were talking about that before, and a few others as well. So I'm not from a sustainability background at all, and I'm going to talk about subjects that are not technical. I'm not going to answer any of the hard questions that come up later. I know there's quite a few people on the call, I think, that know far more than I do. So yeah, I'm just going to talk about people, and I'm going to talk about industry groups. So this is a really boring first slide, but it'll help me talk through what ZERO is. So ZERO is an industry group. We're really young. We're 6 months in to real operation. Our vision is a completely decarbonized construction industry. So really simple vision. I'll kind of break into that in some later slides about how we're going about that. And our mission is to raise awareness outside of the usual bubbles. So outside of the filters and the biases that we all kind of walk around with. And people like me who knew nothing and still know very little, we need to be doing some of the work. We need to be understanding exactly as you're saying, Kathleen, some of the choices we can make. We need to make better ones. We need to change the way we do things, change the way we deliver projects. So we want to raise awareness on that. We're building a playbook, which I'll detail out in a minute, and we want to become a global hub for people like us, people who want to learn more, people who want to make better decisions, people who want to reduce embodied carbon. I think most of us on the call, and Stacy and Kathleen, you've given a great starter anyway as to what embodied carbon is. It's a big problem. It's a serious problem. It's 12% of all human emissions. It's 4 to 5 billion tons of CO2. We don't even know that figure. It spills out into other things. But it's a big problem. It's something we need to deal with. So if I give a little backstory to where the group came from, this is a post from 4 years ago. This is a friend of mine, Will Atkins, who posted the idea that all of us should be doing more for this subject. And it's not the sustainability person on the project who should be dealing with this. It's not a section of the industry, it's all of us. It's literally every one of us. I'm not expecting anyone to read that. But if I go through to the next slide and let you read that for 10 seconds. And so this is one of the founding principles for our industry group. This is the idea that all of us should learn more, share more, and do better with our decisions and what we do on projects, the way we go about them. So building less, building leaner, decarbonizing sites, selecting the correct materials, and just doing everything we can. So Will inspired myself and a few others. And what happened about a year ago is we started messaging each other. I think I sent out a few WhatsApps and it's exploded, which is one of the reasons some of us are quite tired, because we're kind of trying to manage this in our spare time. I'll go around this board briefly. This is kind of the only way we can kind of picture what's happening, because it's moving quickly. We're doing a little bit of social media, but that's going to accelerate quite a lot next year. We want to talk to our kind of, so my background's engineering, construction, and planning. We want to talk to those kind of people and get them on board this journey. We've got a Future Leaders program, which is for the people entering the industry. So we've got a mentor program in there as well, and they're kind of they're activating us. They're keeping us on this path. We're completely not for profit. We're independent. We're pro bono. We're doing this in our spare time. We're building a playbook, which again I'll talk about in a minute. There are 450 members in 40 countries at the moment. We want to grow that. We want to get to 1 million in 5 years. We want everyone on board this. And we're running working groups. So this week we had 6 working groups on 6 topics. And I'll talk about those in a second as well. We have a few sponsors, but next year looks really good for funding. So things are going good. We're growing. It's lots of fun. That's it there. So because we've got so many things going on, and we've got 25 of us in the core team who are kind of moving this forward. We're trying to do it in our spare time again. We thought we'd strip back everything we're doing to one thing, which is building a playbook. So Stacy and Kathleen, what you were talking about there, I really want to get into conversation here and answer some questions, because the playbook picks up on a lot of the things you were saying. The playbook itself will then support our social media, so we'll spin out topics from here. We'll use it to run events. We're running hackathons. We're running other presentation events, and it will be our foundation of guidance for anyone who's interested. So the playbook itself is being built by around 180 people. So this week we had 120 people. They were engineers, project directors, site teams, architects, engineers, quantity surveyors, people like myself from digital backgrounds, a whole range of people, all coming together, sharing ideas on these 6 topics. So the way we're going about this is to get the widest possible angle view. We're not just focused on materials or methods. We're focused on mindset and education and communication. How do we bring these issues to the front? How do we get everyone engaged? 6 topics. And the playbook itself, at the moment, we're not quite sure the final form, but there'll be some kind of big buttons at the top end, a wiki at the bottom. and that wiki will be expandable and searchable, so content built by our teams. There are 42 authors writing this already. We want to get that up to 100, so specialists from all backgrounds, writing the why, what, and how. So these topics are, again, Kathleen, some of the points you were making there about, and Stacy, about targets, about practicing lean, about integrated design teams with construction teams, bringing manufacturers on board, start the process, changing procurement methods, just everything. We started this 6 months ago thinking we would be talking about materials and things, and it seems that we have to kind of cover everything the industry is everywhere. So it's a huge topic. In fact, we don't really talk about carbon that much. We talk about technology, innovation, mindset change, the big things that happen before you select materials and pour that concrete. So yeah, it's lots of fun. It's going well. Last slide. I might open the Miro board if I've got time, Nick knows, you'd let me know. But the Miro board itself is the place that we're capturing all this. And we've got a small editing team who are kind of looking at the whole picture. And we're pulling out some of these themes. So we're pulling out themes on education, like how do we educate C-suite, all the way through to site teams. How do we educate and raise awareness? How do we set targets that maintain through projects? How do we select materials in a way that they're not value engineered at some point in the project? We've got 42 authors. We've got 10 spin-out groups. So some people are looking at business case. Some people are looking at maturity. Yeah, there's just a lot going on. I think that was it, because I really want to get into the panel, and I appreciate it's like 10 minutes left. So yeah, that's it from me.
Awesome, thank you, James. And can you tell us who the people are in the group, what their backgrounds are, and who is qualified to be a part of the group, in case some of our audience wants to apply?
So literally everyone. I'm not sure the figure's 180 million people in construction globally or something, like all of them, everyone. So any background, any experience, any location, any profession, any age. So
anyone from the AEC, basically, architecture, engineering, construction, or tech world?
Literally anyone. Yeah, anyone inside and outside the industry, actually. We should probably start branching out into other industries and learning lessons from other industries and how they've transformed. Transformation is one of the core things we need to understand, and the way we go about change and the way we change mindset. So we have behavioral scientists and data scientists in the group. It's growing, it's growing organically, and we're kind of clustering on different topics as well.
Wonderful. Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks for initiating this great project, James. I'm really honored to be part of it, and I can't wait, to contribute at some point. To our dear audience, please feel free to post your questions to the chat box. Then in the meantime, we're going to ask a couple of questions. Maybe for the first question we can ask, this is a question for all of you. So what is it? Is there like an elephant in the room? What is it that is stopping AEC firms to incorporate and use these sustainable, tools and methods and materials in their process and in their workflow? Maybe if we know what the barriers are, we can hopefully, solve them easier.
I felt the barriers when I was in my role at Skanska trying to figure out how to tackle this. So for me, it came down to access to the data and then education on how to use it. So the data to us is core to what we're doing at Building Transparency. But until we have data that's actual, that's transparent, that's free, that isn't what's for profit, it's hard for anyone to do credible work on top of it. So we're trying to fill that open data gap right now with the work that we're doing. And then it's quite frankly education. I think I hear a lot that, gosh, the big firms can do it because they've got the resources. But quite frankly, my role at Skanska or Kathleen's role at her firm, whether you're at a large firm or a small firm, we're doing the same work. So it's how do we create the education that enables and empowers everyone across the industry to understand that they can do this work.
Great. Thank you. Kathleen, James, any other idea?
Can I go one step past that as well, because we need to drive people to education. There's absolutely education on all levels. You don't need gaps anyway. We can't just be talking to, I'm kind of putting senior management at the top, but let's say senior management in one position and the people on the sites doing different things. We can't have gaps anywhere, so we need to educate everywhere, but we need to drive people to education as well. So the reasons, Kathleen, you were kind of putting out some reasons there, like looking around. We're definitely an industry that hides in plain sight. So pulling out that kind of, letting people, so we as individuals know, we know how to behave. We know that we shouldn't be eating red meat or flying, or, you know, like, let's question electric vehicles and the way we go about our individual lives. But we're an industry that hides absolutely in plain sight. So maybe we need to do another piece there in educating the world and getting them to look at us in the way that we look at agriculture.
Yep. Awesome. Great. Thanks. Kathleen, would you like
Yeah.
to?
And I would say that, like, I think there's like a self-defeating prophecy within our industry of like, oh, the architects only care about aesthetics and engineers just, you know, are bad at anything other than crunching numbers, and the contractors are jerks and the owners are only interested in money. And those are all like stereotypes and weird things that we've picked up. And I think that at every beginning of a project, we should challenge that and kind of come together and start with, you know, how can carbon and sustainability, how can it make for better projects, save people money, bring us all together? And I think if we kind of start from that attitude, and I think that's like what's so important to the work that James is doing, and then all of the open source tools that Stacy and her team do, if you kind of help people see it as not a scary, expensive process, everybody's gonna get excited, and it makes our job so much more exciting. I mean, I could work in finance, but that's no fun. You know what I mean? Like, we're in this because we care and we want to make amazing projects for people that, you know, last for centuries. So I think we just need to bring that energy to the table on every project. Because I definitely agree with Stacy. Like, I work for a fancy engineering company. You know, it's great, but it's fancy. You know, like, we need to get that into everybody and make sure everyone has the tools. And I think the kind of professional organizations and movements that James is putting together too are such a big part of this. Because I've got so much tools and resources, and I just want to share it with everybody. So I think sharing and having that mentality is really important for us to get over the humps and the barriers.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. We have a couple of questions. Maybe I start from the shortest one. I hope we can address all of them. We have still 5 minutes. So Sherry is asking, are there barriers related to insurance? And could the construction insurance industry help drive this movement?
So I would jump in just from my Skanska perspective. I think typically the biggest perceived, the things that Kathleen says, contractors are jerks, right? We're just risk adverse and we're driven by cost and efficiency. So anything that is a perceived risk is something that we push back on typically in the general contractor space. I don't know if insurance is where this will be driven by the most. It's the financial side of things where we're really seeing the kind of the stick or the drive where as things are coming through, like here in the US with the SEC requirements around investment and financial disclosure being tied to climate disclosure, as some of those things get brought down into the construction industry, if there's a carbon price that's put on things, where we can start having it in the same vernacular as kind of cost risk or cost impact, I think it will help the construction industry, you know, pick this up a little more. So we typically look at this through the lens of cost and kind of cost incentives or cost impacts.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathleen. James, is there anything else you would like to add?
I mean, I think I'll share an article that was just in, I think, BD+C about like changing to flood insurance or like wildfire insurance. You know, if you're a big portfolio company, you're going to get hit hard by rising insurance age of climate change. So I think we all kind of need to work together to, you know, like, I mean, if you've got a building in Miami and you're designing a crappy high carbon building in Los Angeles, you're working against yourself. So I think we need to be better at speaking about that. And I think, you know, Stacy's exactly right, is that we need to take people's concerns, like contractors being concerned about risk, and help fold that into the carbon story. I think that's really important, but it's all going to come for us, and insurance is going to play such a huge role in this. I'll find the link.
Wonderful, thanks so much. So Shibei Huang, sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name right, is asking, so she's saying for operational carbon, we got reference EUI and specific baseline benchmarking tools. Do you see, and she's asking, do you see this kind of benchmarking being developed in the future for embodied carbon?
It's here now. So the work that the Carbon Leadership Forum has done around, it's called we call it, well, Building Transparency calls it embodied carbon intensity, where it's a kilogram of CO2 per square foot or square meter of your building stock. So all the benchmarking studies right now are calculating up these kind of project level emissions with that kilogram per building size metric. And that's how EC3 tracks it also, where you can actually build up your project and see what your kilogram of CO2 per square foot or square meter is, and then track towards zero. So how do you reduce that over time and really ratchet it down like we do with energy use intensity?
Awesome. Great, thank you. Kathleen, James, is there anything else?
No, I'm just really glad. I'm really glad Stacey and Kathleen are here because no,
I would say that, yeah, I would definitely say that like the metrics that we have both for EUI and like for embodied carbon in terms of like for carbon like kilograms per meter squared, they're great and we need those. And like ILFI zero carbon caps it at 500, which is great and a hard number to hit if you're being honest. But we also need to think about absolute. Like we need companies to start setting absolute carbon targets through science-based targets, which means that we're going to be building less. And I know that's scary for a lot of us, but we need to be thinking about adaptive reuse. We need to be thinking about how creative can we do to actually lower the absolute carbon and not just kBTU per feet squared or the kg per meter squared. Like we need to start thinking about how can we adopt, you know, at a master planning level, at a portfolio level, the absolute carbon reduction numbers. Because we haven't done sufficiency. If we build too much, right? And even if we get one building to be more efficient, building way too much is still going to be a problem for us in carbon. You know, that's the elephant in the room that we're going to have to figure out. But, you know, doesn't mean that our jobs change that much. We just need to be smarter about how we're building.
Great, thank you so much. So we have one more minute. Maybe we're gonna address one more question. So Rami is asking about EPD and the 5-year renewal cycle. So what is the future of how LCAs are performed in relation to the 5-year renewal and how it can impact projects who are procuring materials that are reaching the renewal terms? Basically, would there be a more lean way to keep the update process?
So I'm sorry I'm jumping in, but this is our world, so I keep on answering these questions. But the EPD one specifically, we've developed a digital process for EPD standardization where it's all in the same digital language. So that's one mechanism, just making it more efficient to create EPDs and pass them around digitally versus the current process of PDF documents. So efficient, cheaper, more digital. And the second thing is through this lens of manufacturers wanting to show improvements, that incentivizes them to actually publish. As the minute they make a change to their product, they want to publish a new EPD so that they're seeing that improvement show up in EC3 and within the other tools that are using EPD data. And that, we just have a great example of that from Kingspan, who just did that based on a reduction in their product. So those are the two mechanisms that we're seeing that are helping with that reduction of the 5-year cycle.
Thank you, James. Kathleen, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I would say that, you know, I think like blockchain and the material passports are going to make this start to help all like the work that's facing and building transparency and having that like nestled into like an easy way to update this. And I was looking at the EC3 numbers the other day, and I think when I did a presentation back in 2019, the numbers have like tripled in some sectors of our industry and some haven't. So like we really need to start asking, we need to get like the MEP manufacturers to get on board with the EPDs. We need to get the smaller manufacturers, the ones that contribute to, you know, larger products. It has to be everyone. Like it started out with, I think like the big manufacturers, and we really need to be putting pressure on regional markets because we need everybody in the room to get together and on supply chain, because we're not going to meet it if we're only doing it for structural engineering and we're not doing it for ductwork or we're not doing it for, you know, all of the different finishes that are out there. So I think it's going to be a big problem for a lot of people is like, how do we start asking more people to get involved with the EPDs and having them? And hopefully it starts with carbon, but then that's the way that we get rid of modern day slavery, and that's how we get carcinogens out of our supply chain. But I think, you know, the work of starting it with carbon is increasing transparency is going to help all those issues.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Thank you so much. So with that, we can wrap up the discussion. I'd like to thank our three amazing panelists today. Thanks so much for joining us and generously sharing your experience and insight. Also, special thanks to our audience for being with us today. We all learned a lot about embodied carbon and the ways we as an industry can reduce it and save the planet. So the video will be saved on our YouTube channel. We hope to see you again at our next events. Thanks so much to our dear panelists, and have a wonderful rest of the day and rest of the evening, James, and have a great weekend.
Thanks.